Welcome to World of Tanks, Commander. Here you'll find the battlefields are brutal and your opponents relentless and unforgiving. It takes each commander a strong grasp of tactics to survive. Tactics like tracking enemies for teammates to finish them off, distraction and flanking maneuvers, coordinating with your platoon, focusing your fire, and group rushing. In World of Tanks, it's always tactics that win the battles. I'm Mobius Y, just another tanker like you, and I'm here to help. This is the Tactics Talk.
Hey everyone, it's Mobius Y here with another episode here on Tactics Talk. So with episode 6 here, we're going to go over something coinciding with the crew skills and perks that I went over in episode 5 to give you a better idea of what you can put on your tank to help it perform better for you. And with this episode, we're going to go over the equipment and supplies available to each tank. Just like with crew perks and crew skills, I'll highlight the details and explain exactly what each piece of equipment does for you, as well as give my recommendation on the kinds of tanks you want to use it on. So, starting off, I'm going to open up the equipment on my Matilda here. Let's go over the equipment first. So starting off, there are two kinds of equipment available. You have complex equipment, such as enhanced gun laying drive and medium spall liner. And you have removable equipment, such as camouflage net, binocular telescope, and toolbox. And how you can tell the difference between the two is the golden hex nut icon in the top right of the card picture for the complex equipment. The other three pieces of equipment, the removable equipment, does not have that golden hex nut visible. And the only difference between complex equipment and removable equipment is that complex equipment requires 10 gold to be removed for full silver refund. So if you are one of those people who plays this game 100% free, that is probably the number one thing you want to be saving your gold for from watching the training videos, is demounting complex equipment, as that can, in the long run, save you a lot of silver. Of course, it will eventually run out, so, you know, what can you do from there? Anyways, starting with the removable equipment, there's only 3 options. The camouflage net, the binocular telescope, and the toolbox. Now, the main problem with these 3 is because people see that they are removable without the cost of gold, they think that it's acceptable to put all 3 of these pieces of equipment on pretty much every tank they own. That is 100% false. There are so many tanks in the game that could benefit better from not having a camouflage net or binocular telescope. And honestly, there's not a hell of a lot of tanks out there that I would recommend you put a toolbox on, as again, that could probably be used for something better. There are situations and tanks where a toolbox will be helpful, but they're pretty few and far between. In the case of the camo net and the binocs, the reason why they're largely ineffective on the vast majority of tanks is because they kind of support more of a hang back and snipe kind of play style, which is not how you should be playing 85 to 90% of the tanks in the game, in my personal opinion. But anyways, let's move on from that. Starting with the removable equipment, the first one is camouflage net. And camouflage net not only has the advantage of being fairly cheap for equipment, it ranges anywhere from about 80,000 silver to 100,000 silver, compared to some that can cost $500,000 on higher tier tanks. But essentially what camouflage net does, is it adds 25% camouflage bonus to tanks that have it equipped when the camouflage net is active. Camouflage net only kicks in when your tank has been sitting still for approximately 3 seconds. And this countdown only begins when your tank reaches a dead stop. And then it will take 3 seconds for the camouflage net to kick in. Due to the nature of how camouflage net works, this is not useful on frontline tanks whatsoever. This is not useful on flanking and peekabooing mediums whatsoever. It's not really that useful on assault tank destroyers that are going to be on the front line anyways, because they're going to get spotted regardless. Camouflage net works best on turreted tank destroyers and passive scouting light tanks, such as the Borsig, the Rheinmetall Borsig Tier 8 German tank destroyer, the Hellcat Tier 6 US tank destroyer, the ELC AMX Tier 5 French Scout. Those can all benefit from a camouflage net. And essentially what it means by adding 25% to the camo rating of the tank is that the camo bonus imparted by the camouflage net is better for smaller tanks as well as tanks that have a higher base camo rating. So something like a big heavy like a Tiger II will get very minimal benefit from a camouflage net compared to, say, a T-25-2 turreted tank destroyer, or even like I said, an ELC AMX or a Hellcat. So those are pretty much the only kinds of tanks you want to put a camouflage net on. And I forgot to note that rotating the turret does not deactivate the camouflage net, hence why it's useful on turreted tank destroyers. Binocular telescope works very much the same way as the camouflage net does, in that it only kicks in when your tank has been sitting still for 3 seconds. And where camouflage adds to your camouflage factor, binocular telescope adds to your view range. So if you stack a camo net and a binocs on your passive scout, they really work together quite well on an appropriate tank. So binocs, as they're called, adds plus 25% to the base view range of the tank. So if your tank has 400 meters of view range, it'll add another 100 meters, bypassing the 445 meter hard cap maximum spotting distance to 500 meters. So essentially you would be able to much more easily spot even well camouflaged enemy vehicles within those 445 meters, even though your supposed maximum view range is 500 meters. Again, binocular telescope pretty much only useful on passive scouts and turreted tank destroyers, like the ones that I mentioned previously. Toolbox, also removable equipment, plus 25% to repair speed. This means that any destroyed modules will repair more quickly. It's just like the repair skill, and these two items, the repair skill and the toolbox, do stack together along with a large repair kit. And they even stack with the track mechanic crew perk for repairing your tracks really quickly. The toolbox can be handy on some of your frontline heavies to help repair your tracks much more quickly, as well as on a tank that has a largely untrained crew where you do not have the repair skill just yet. You can swap out, say, your vertical stabilizer or what have you for a toolbox to help get your tracks repairing and your various other modules repairing as best as they possibly can. So that's basically a brief synopsis on the removable equipment. Like I said, just because they're free to take off and refund for full silver doesn't mean they should be slapped onto every tank. Honestly, let's face it. What good is a binocular telescope and a toolbox going to be on a piece of artillery? I mean, come on. A little common sense is required here. Anyways, moving on to some of the complex equipment. Starting with coated optics. This adds plus 10% to your view range. So if you have a 400 meter view range, it adds 40 meters. Essentially, what your tank's maximum base view range is, say it's 370. Take off the third number in the 3-digit view range, and that's how much of a bonus you'll get with coated optics. So if it's 370, you're getting 37 for a maximum of 407, not including various other crew skills and perks. Coated optics, I use it on just about everything, save for artillery. I prefer it on my scouts as well because it is always active compared to the binocular telescope. Plus, I believe it is a must-have on medium tanks. Especially if you play aggressive like I do. I'm always on the front line, but I still would like to have a little bit of an advantage in the vision wars, especially for closing out later in a game or even in the middle stages of a game, trying to soften up enemy targets by sniping them before they can see me. Gun rammer. In this case, it says medium caliber tank gun rammer. There's multiple different kinds of names for this in the equipment menu. There's medium caliber, there's large caliber, there's medium caliber artillery rammer, so on and so forth. But those all generally do the same thing. Minus 10% to loading time. all that does is it gives the greatest bonus to reducing the reload speed, to reducing how many seconds it takes to load your next shell in the gun. Honestly, this should be on just about every tank except for scouts, in my personal opinion. Autoloaders cannot mount a gun rammer, or at the very least, most autoloaders cannot mount a gun rammer. And I don't see the need in putting it on scout tanks like my VK16 Chaffee, my VK16 Leopard and my Chaffee. I don't have it on either of those, as they are scouts first, in my personal opinion, and that is honestly how I play them. But apart from that, you probably should put a gun rammer on everything: artillery, your tank destroyers, your medium tanks, your heavy tanks. Pretty much every tank you have should have a gun rammer. Enhanced gun laying drive, plus 10% to aiming speed. So since aiming time actually, the lower the aim time number in the base stats, the faster it is. This actually means it reduces the aim time by 10%. This is good for a more kind of laid-back sniping approach to your tanks, as well as a good alternative to the vertical stabilizer if the vertical stabilizer is not available. The reason why I say that is it has actually been proven that the vertical stabilizer is always and will be 100% a better choice than the gun laying drive if you have an option between the two. If there is no vertical stabilizer available, then a gun laying drive isn't a bad choice whatsoever. Personally, I have one on my Panzer III-4 Tier 5 German medium tank because the aim time is bad. Even with the gun laying drive, it's still bad, but it's much more tolerable. The gun laying drive helps you aim in your shots more quickly, so you can fire them off at maximum accuracy at a faster rate. But the problem with the gun laying drive is that it is not working unless your tank is completely immobile. It does not work. It's not working at all if your tank is moving or if your turret is rotating. That's the problem with the enhanced gun laying drive. And it's not really something that's mentioned, and you can't really tell that it's happening, but you have to be completely immobile for this to kick in and to be active. Excuse me. Medium spall liner. Now, there's multiple types of spall liner. There's light, medium, heavy, and super heavy, ranging from 20% bonuses, 25%, 30%, and 50% for the super heavy spall liner. So spall liners essentially reduce damage from ramming and explosions. And what explosions means is you will take less splash damage from high explosive shells that do not penetrate your armor. So essentially, they help. A spall liner will better help protect you against artillery. It will better help protect you against people ramming you and doing damage to you that way. And it also will help protect your crew from critical damage, as it says there as well. The thing about the spall liner, though, is that if an artillery shell actually lands on the top of your tank and still penetrates you, it will still do full damage. Protection from explosions is only protection from splash damage. So if a high explosive shell still penetrates your tank, it will still do near full damage and really hurt your tank. But it will offer better protection against either splash damage from a nearby artillery shell on the ground or splash damage from a high explosive shell shot at your thick armor from some other tank spewing high explosives. For example, an SU-152 with the 152mm howitzer. Spall liner is a good one for your frontline large heavy tanks, as well as your slower assault TDs that are artillery magnets, as well as I personally use it on my E-50 Ossifem and my Panzer V-4, as those tanks are very effective at ramming as a means of attacking enemies and dealing damage to them. They also get a nice added bonus of protecting the crew from critical damage, and that can stack with a large first aid kit from its passive bonus as well. Improved ventilation, plus 5% to all crew skills. This essentially kind of acts like the Brothers in Arms perk, so you can stack vents and Brothers in Arms. What you can do with vents is if you don't have the choice of using, say, optics or something like that, or even a vertical stabilizer and a gun laying drive, you can just throw on vents for a minor boost to the entire performance of your vehicle. Now, it says 5% bonus to all crew skills. That does not mean that it's going to add 5% to your gun's loading time. It adds 5% bonus to the loader itself, your crew member itself, not the actual hard stats of the tank. So it's been mathematically proven that the bonus is only about 2.2% to the exact hard stats of the tank in terms of, say, view range as well as reload speed and stuff like that. Vents are great on scout tanks. If you run, you can run either binocs or optics, and then also throw on vents to stack with those to help improve your scout's camo rating as well as its view range. Similar thing with some of your more sniping TDs, such as long-range turreted tank destroyers. Artillery can really make use out of vents to reduce both the aim time and the reload speed of your artillery. Honestly, vents could go on anything, but me personally, I would prefer something like optics or a vertical stabilizer over improved vents, improved ventilation, because I'm more of a big boost to one specific area over a very subtle boost to everything kind of person. Wet ammo rack is one in a several group that I'm just going to say module durability. There's wet ammo rack. There's also, for example, where the heck is it? Fill tanks with CO2. There's cyclone filter for Russian and Chinese tanks, for example. Essentially what those do is those add 50% durability to the module that it specifies. In the case of wet ammo rack, it adds plus 50% to ammo rack durability. Cyclone filter does plus 50% to durability to your engine, and fill tanks with CO2 does plus 50% to your fuel tank's hit points. So essentially what this means is that it adds hit points, it adds half of the hit points of the module on it again to make it much more difficult to damage and or destroy. Every module in every tank has a number of hit points required for it to be damaged and or destroyed. And essentially this adds another 50% of those hit points to that specific module. These kind of pieces of equipment, better used, is better. You're better off just training the crew skill or perk safe stowage and or preventative maintenance, as both of those pretty much both those crew skills and or perks pretty much mitigate some of that. They don't do it as well as a piece of equipment. The skills only do it by about 12.5% or 25%. The equipment does it by 50%. But still, you're better off using these for a different kind of piece of equipment. Me personally, I mostly just use them until my crew trains on the specific skill that covers the same thing, and then I switch out this piece of equipment for something else. For example, my Leopard 1 currently has a wet ammo rack, as you can see here, but once the crew itself trains safe stowage, which will be the next one after Brothers in Arms, then I will be putting on a vertical stabilizer and getting rid of the wet ammo rack. Okay, enhanced horizontal leaf springs. This is essentially one of the many under enhanced suspension. So this includes enhanced springs, enhanced horizontal coil springs, enhanced vertical coil springs, vertical leaf springs, Christie suspension, torsion bars, horizontal leaf springs, like the list goes on. Enhanced Belleville washers, so on and so forth, etc., etc. Those all fall under enhanced suspension, and what those do is your tracks have essentially 20% more hit points in order for them to be detracked. So it makes it harder for your tank to have its tracks blown out and be immobilized. And it adds plus 50% protection from non-tank collision damage. So essentially falling off cliffs and crap like that. If you're accident prone or frequently take shortcuts, enhanced suspension will help protect your tank from suffering damage sliding down cliffs and so on and so forth. Honestly, the tank selection that can actually fit these pieces of equipment is so limited, and the actual benefits of running them is really, really not worth it compared to running something like coated optics or especially a gun rammer and even like a vertical stabilizer or a spall liner. To be 100% honest, there's almost no reason to run these over pretty much any other piece of equipment in the game. So that's basically how I feel on those. One that wasn't seen on the Matilda, vertical stabilizer, plus 20% to accuracy during movement and turret rotation. The reason why I say this is better than the enhanced gun laying drive is because vertical stabilizer is always on. When your tank is moving, when your turret is rotating, it is active. It is reducing the overall dispersion penalties incurred by either tank movement or turret rotation. Essentially, what are
quickly dubbed as soft stats. It reduces those penalties by 20%, and it is always doing that. The gun laying drive is only reducing your aim time when your tank is completely still and the turret is not rotating. So by reducing the size of the dispersion reticule before you even come to a complete stop, the time it takes for the reticule to fully aim in to 100% accuracy on the tank, it's faster than it would be to have to come to a stop and wait the half second or so for the gun laying drive to kick in when you are completely still and actually reduce your aim time. Vertical stabilizer is an amazing piece of equipment for aggressive tanks and aggressive players such as myself. In fact, I have this on just about all of my high tier tanks except for my Object 268 pretty much. It's wonderful for heavy tanks and mediums. You can use it on your lights, especially autoloader lights, including like the AMX 1390 or the T71. Essentially, this is one of those pieces of equipment that you should almost consider it, you should be considering it for just about every tank in the game, if it is available. It's not, I don't think it's available or necessary on things like artillery. You're stuck using a gun laying drive on artillery, which is fine. So go with that instead. But if the option is ever available, where you already have two pieces of equipment used up, and you have the choice between a gun laying drive and a vertical stabilizer, go with the vertical stabilizer. Always, 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 always. It is 100% proven that it is better 100% of the time. There's one more piece of equipment that I'm not going to be able to bring up. It's kind of like another piece of suspension, and it's pretty much only available on a select number of German tanks, mostly lower tier Germans, up to about tier 6, and they're called additional grousers. Essentially what they are is they don't work like the enhanced springs or anything like that, where they add protection to your tracks and any protection from damage. How the additional grousers works is they make your terrain resistances better. So your soft and medium terrain resistances, so things like really crappy swampy terrain and even just plain dirt, you have better terrain resistance values on those kinds of terrain with additional grousers, and it essentially makes it so that your tank can maintain its top speed better on that kind of terrain, as well as accelerate better on that kind of terrain. Similar to the suspension upgrades, borderline useless on most every tank. There's a very small selection of tanks that I would even consider putting those on, to be totally honest with you. And I believe that sums up the equipment available. So I'm going to go ahead and into the supplies menu now and go over some of the supplies that are available. So essentially with supplies, at the top of the list, I'm sure a lot of you know this by now, the top three options are your ammo types. The first bar is essentially your standard ammo. So in this case, because I chose the FV4202, which is a tier 10 medium, the standard ammo is APCR. The second slot, which usually indicates that this ammo costs gold, if you had any, that is considered your premium ammo, as it essentially, most of the time, it's the same thing as your standard ammo, where it does the same damage, just with much higher pen. You can see it here on the Comet, the armor-piercing composite rigid. It does the same damage as the Comet standard AP ammo, but it has much higher penetration and it's much more expensive. It's never a bad thing to always have a couple pieces of ammunition. Premium ammo with standard tanks, so basically anything but artillery, is either APCR or heat rounds, depending on which tank it is. Most lower tier tanks will shoot APCR, and you don't really see heat rounds up until the higher tiers, so around tiers 7 through 10, essentially. Excuse me. The third option is high explosive round, which has higher damage but way lower penetration typically, and it's also very cheap to run. Very good against extremely softly armored targets, essentially, and you should always carry just a couple because you can shoot it at a thinly armored piece, thinly protected piece of armor on a tank that is nearly dead and finishing off its last 20 points of HP with splash damage. That about sums that up. There is also HESH ammo, which is available on a lot of higher tier British tanks. For example, the FE-4202's premium round is a much higher penetration sort of HESH, but it also gets a much more basic HESH for its high explosive type of ammunition. That's essentially how that works there. Now, the other part of supplies at the bottom of the page is your consumables. And what your consumables do is, unlike equipment, they are a one-time use kind of thing during a battle, and they have to be resupplied between every battle. And these range in between all sorts of different things that you can put on. Each one has various different benefits to your tank. So starting off, I'm going to go with the absolute basics. Your small repair kit repairs a damaged module. So your gun gets knocked out, or your tracks get destroyed, or your ammo rack is damaged. You use your small repair kit. You hold the button that it's assigned to, and then select the module that's damaged, and it will repair it instantly, bringing it back to 100% optimum performance. Your small first aid kit does the same thing, except for healing an injured crew member. You hold the associated button, select the injured crew member, and heal him back to full health, returning your tank to optimum performance. And your manual fire extinguisher, it simply puts out a fire. If your tank catches fire, you press the button associated to the fire extinguisher, and the fire is put out right away, preventing other crew members and modules from being killed and or damaged. These three here, small repair, small first aid, and manual fire, honestly, you should have, at the very least, you should have these three things on every tank in your garage. Don't look at it as, oh my god, that's going to cost me so much silver. Look at it, honestly, it'll probably save you silver, because instead of playing out the rest of your game with, say, a damaged gun and a dead gunner, you're gonna spend the 6,000 silver to repair your gun and heal your injured gunner, therefore restoring the performance of your gun, surviving till the end of the game, and using your much more accurate gun to deal more damage and earn that silver back. That's essentially how that would work. If you simply don't want to listen to me because you think I'm an idiot, at the very least put on a frickin' manual fire extinguisher. I've lost count how many times I've seen in high tier games with, say, an E100 or a T110 E5. I set them on fire and they just sit there burning for the next 20 seconds. That can be anywhere between 500 to 800 points of HP damage, as well as untold quantities of module and crew damage to your tank. All because you didn't want to spend the 3,000 silver to put a frickin' fire extinguisher on. Don't be stupid and put one on. You should at least have a fire extinguisher on every tank, at the bare minimum. Personally, I would recommend automatic fire extinguishers from about tiers 5 and 6 all the way up to tier 10, as the automatic fire extinguishers are better, and I'll explain more why in just a minute here. A couple other universal pieces of equipment here. These are kind of considered premium pieces of equipment. Your large repair kit, just like your small repair kit, it repairs damaged modules, but when you use it, it repairs all your damaged modules instantly. Your large first aid kit will heal all injured crew members instantly when you hit the button. And your automatic fire extinguisher, you don't have to think about it. It will automatically activate and put out a fire whenever your tank catches fire. The advantage over these large size consumables over the small ones is not just that they damage all your repair all your damaged modules or heal all your injured crew members, but they have a passive bonus that is granted but up until the moment that these are used. So don't be afraid to throw one of these on just for the passive bonus. It will not cost you the required resupply cost until you actually use it in a game. A lot of people shy away from these because they think that they have to pay gold for them, but that can be changed by simply selecting them from the list of possible consumables and then highlighting it in your supplies menu, pressing the Y button to choose your currency, and then you save and exit from the tank. And next time you go into the supplies, you'll see that now you have a large repair kit and you spent silver for it instead of gold. So that essentially works for all of these so-called premium consumables that look like they cost gold. And remember, just because they cost a higher amount of silver doesn't mean that you will always be spending that much silver every game. Now I'm going to go into why I think an automatic fire extinguisher is better over a manual fire extinguisher. I forgot to mention the large first aid kit's passive bonus It adds 30% protection from critical damage to your crew, so it's your crew is less likely to be injured and or killed in the event of a battle. And the large repair kit's passive bonus is it will add an extra 10% bonus to the repair of your destroyed modules. So the most noticeable one being your tracks. You can actually combine a large repair kit with a piece of toolbox equipment and the skills, repairs, and track mechanic. Put all those on your big bad tier 10 heavy tank and just laugh as people try to track you and circle you, because your tracks will repair in about 2.5 seconds. If you want to go super over troll, then be my guest. Give it a shot for a few games. It's amusing, but I wouldn't recommend relying on it. Anyways, moving on. Like I said, about the automatic fire extinguisher. The reason why I feel the automatic fire extinguisher is way better than the manual fire extinguisher is, number one, it automatically puts out your fire right away. You only take 1 ping's worth of damage with the automatic fire extinguisher active. What I mean by ping is every time, whenever you set an enemy tank on fire and you see that number pop up above it, which pops up about 3 times a second, showing the amount of damage it's suffering from the fire, I call that a ping, quote unquote. So with a manual fire extinguisher, you might not realize you're on fire right away, so you'll take a few pings worth of damage before you hit the button to put that fire out. But the automatic fire extinguisher does it after the first ping. So not only will you take less damage, but there's a less likelihood that you'll even catch on fire to begin with, because the automatic fire extinguisher, when it is equipped, has a passive bonus of reducing your chance of catching fire by another 10%. So if you have most of your high tier crews and even your mid tier crews have preventative maintenance as well as an automatic fire extinguisher, you're drastically reducing the chance that your tank will catch fire. And even if it does, it's a whopping 20,000 silver, and it will not happen that often unless you are in a fire-prone tank, say a Tiger 2, because everybody shoots it in the lower plate, and that's right where the engine is. You never know. That's essentially what goes on there, but I definitely recommend use an automatic fire extinguisher over a manual one as often as possible. If you simply don't want to do it, at the very least bring a manual fire extinguisher so that you don't suffer thousands upon thousands of HP damage and repair costs just because you didn't want to spend the extra 3,000 silver to put out fires on your tank and essentially keep you in the game longer. That's basically how that works. As you can see here, this consumable is called pudding and tea. On other tanks, it's different depending on the nation. For example, German tanks get chocolate. U.S. tanks get a case of cola, so on and so forth. My STB-1 has onigiri for its food consumable, and I actually have it equipped. Essentially, like I said, this is just dubbed the food consumable for short. And what it does is it adds plus 10% to all crew skills and perks. So it's like the improved ventilation and a piece of equipment and the Brothers in Arms skill, but it adds a bigger overall boost. Now this is considered another premium consumable because it does cost 20,000 silver to equip it. So it's not cheap, but it definitely gives you a performance boost, and for the most part, you want to stick it on tanks where you really, really, really want to maximize one aspect of something. Say you have a scout tank and you want the biggest view range possible, so you slap on your coated optics, your improved ventilation, you do your Brothers in Arms skill, you do your situational awareness and recon crew skills as well, and then you also put on onigiri. That will give you a massive view range boost to your tank, as opposed to simply just putting on optics or just putting on vents. These items all stack together when you do that. So the same thing happens on my STB-1 with the way that I stacked Brothers in Arms with a gun rammer, and for a while there I ran vents and onigiri. So I had the fastest reload speed possible with the STB-1 because the STB-1 saving grace is dumping massive amounts of DPM. That's essentially how that works. It is expensive to run, but I use onigiri on my STB-1 as well as case of cola on my American artillery. You might want to consider in your higher tier artillery running a food consumable, as there's really no reason to have something like a fire extinguisher or even oil or better oil or better gasoline in your artillery, because you don't really need a fire extinguisher. If you're getting shot, you're probably going to die in about 2 seconds anyways. If you catch fire, you're probably fucked over anyways. And something like 100 octane for better engine power. I mean, do you really need that in a piece of artillery? You're not going to move a hell of a lot. That's just my thinking on that. This one here, this is called quality oil, plus 5% to engine power for the course of the battle. It's quality oil for Japanese tanks, and I believe Chinese tanks as well, perhaps. For Russian vehicles, it's called Lend-Lease oil. It adds 5%, plus 5% to engine power. And then for U.S., German, British, and I believe French vehicles, you get 100 octane gasoline and 105 octane gasoline. All of those essentially add engine power in the sense that they're not going to make your tank go to move at a higher top speed. They're just going to give it better engine power so that it accelerates better. These are good on tanks where you don't need something like a fire extinguisher and don't want to use something expensive like a food consumable. Instead, you just use the 3,000 or 5,000 silver gasoline consumable, and you will be paying that silver every game just like you would with a food consumable because it gets used up every game. Me personally, I don't have octane or extra gasoline on very many tanks. I know my E50 OSFM has had 100 octane gasoline on it because, unlike the E50, it doesn't accelerate like a rocket. So I wanted to help do that. And when you do something like put on 100 octane gasoline and you stack it with, say, Brothers in Arms, vents, and off-road driving, that will definitely help. All of those stacking together will help with the acceleration of your tank. So you can do it that way. And another reason I have it on the E50 OSFM is the engine block is in the back of the tank as opposed to in the lower front plate, like with the E50. So it's much less likely that I will suffer engine damage and engine fire. Therefore, I do not have a fire extinguisher on this vehicle whatsoever. One more piece of equipment in the supplies tab here in the consumables. Removed speed governor. This is an active piece of equipment that you turn on and off at will, and when it is on, it adds 10% to your engine power, helping your tank accelerate better. But if it is left on for too long, it will actually damage your engine module, resulting in you being forced to use a repair kit to fix it. Remove speed governor will like Lend-Lease oil and stuff like that supposedly they add engine power, but they do not increase the top speed of your vehicle. They simply help it accelerate better. That's how that works. So remove speed governor. You can turn it off when you're getting closer to your top speed, and when you're going from a standstill and you need to rocket halfway across the map, you need to get up to your top speed much more quickly. You can just turn it on for a couple seconds and then turn it back off again for a while. And prevent the chance of it damaging your engine from it being kept on for too long. I believe that covers all of the supplies available in the game. Yeah, I'm 100% that does cover that covers all the supplies in the game here. I forgot to note that 100 octane gasoline, Lend-Lease oil, and quality oil, those all add to engine power by 5%. 105 octane gasoline, which is considered the premium type of that consumable, it adds 10%, and it costs 20,000 silver to run it. It is expensive to run, but it does increase engine power. The difference between the 100 octane and 105 octane gasoline over the Lend-Lease oil and the quality oil is they also add a small bonus to your turret traverse speed on your tank. So that might be another consideration. Personally, I feel it does kind of help with the turret traverse on the E50 OSFM, as it is fairly low for a high-tier medium tank. So that's essentially how that goes, folks. I hope you learned something here with this tactics talk. Thankfully, I wasn't as long-winded as I was with the crew perks and skills. So I do hope that I was able to give you a good idea of better equipment loadouts for your tank that you might want to try out, as well as some good pieces of supplies and consumables to put on your tank. I'm going to say this right now. If you glean anything from this video, please glean that you should at the very least put a small repair, small first aid, and definitely a manual fire extinguisher on every tank in your garage. It's very cheap to add these, and honestly, in the long run, they will actually save you silver rather than cost you silver. So I'm going to wrap it up right about there. That was episode 6 of Tactics Talk. Like I said, I really hope that was helpful for you guys, and I really hope you learned something there. And hopefully episode 7 of Tactics Talk will also come out fairly shortly here, sometime in September. But until then, this is Mobius Y. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll hope to see you on the battlefield. You guys have a good night. I'll talk to you later. Bye.